Welcome to Space Terminal, the show where we sit down with founders defining the next frontier of infrastructure. Today, I'm joined by Shreyaans Jain, founder of Qosmic. They're optimizing satellite data downlinks. Our listeners are leaders, operators, officers, and partners building in space. Welcome, Shreyaans. What convinced you that satellite communications is the right wedge?
The reason why satellite communication it's just a bedrock of anything that you do in space. And your bedrock has to fundamentally become a lot more robust. And that is why we went after the space communication business. And sort of just backtracking, we came from very quantum engineering, quantum sciences background. So we wanted to build quantum communications at large. And while we explored that area and wanted to do QKD from space and these kinds of things, we realized that there is a core infrastructure problem here in terms of connectivity from space to ground. And that helped us realize this very keen mode that this baseline infrastructure for space comms has sort of remained stagnant or in the clutches of RF for the past 100 years. Now, if we have to move forward in terms of more data and a lot of this technology, you have to move towards an entirely different stack that is capable for the data of tomorrow. Space comms is the core focus from an infrastructure perspective.
What does the world look like when Qosmic wins?
Every single photon that hits Earth, every single photon of information is through Qosmic. We want to be that indispensable to the space communication infrastructure. Every single piece of information should be through the Qosmic network. And that is how we envision winning at Qosmic. Because we know that we are now at the cusp of being an interplanetary species. Only once in humanity do you get a chance to build the gateway to the cosmos, which is the optical highway to the cosmos, our main goal. So we want to build towards this infrastructure from day one. We know it's capex heavy. We are willing to put everything on the line to be able to build this infrastructure.
Data downlink today using RF costs $17 a GB. You're dropping this to $1 per GB. How?
Even right now, it's sort of in that 2G era of communication. Like if you would remember, you used to pay by the minute for your phone, and data wasn't really a core ask of a consumer. When we were in the 2G era of communications, we were just, hey, I want to call my friend, and that's that. That is how space comms has happened in the past, because it was largely just governments, academia, and these kinds of people. It never looked like an industry at large. And now when the industry is putting more and more satellites in the sky, there is a fundamental need for data to be the core driver of your data downlink. We want to focus from that perspective. Nobody cares for the amounts of minutes that I'm downlinking for. They only care, the customer only cares for the amount of data that they're able to send down. And that has to become fundamentally cheaper. Because compared to traditional radio frequency, which is charging you $17 to $3 per GB, and that is because they're charging you by the minute at 50 to 10 Mbps from space. Optical happens at Gbps speeds. So for me, every single second is a data downlink for you guys, for the satellite operator. That is why I'm able to charge this at that $1 per GB, because I know the way we have built the ground station infrastructure at Qosmic, we are 4 times cheaper compared to any Western counterpart. If it takes $1 million for somebody to ship a ground station, optical ground station, I can do that in $150K. And that enables me to not just sell ground stations, but to have an operation of ground stations. I don't want to sell ground stations to people, because that again is a very capex intensive investment for them. I don't want that to be the case. You just operate as you want to, and you just pay by the minute. You don't have to own infra, you don't have to do anything. We take care of all of those things.
You're dropping the capex to a fraction of what RF large dishes cost, in the millions.
Yes.
Talk to me about OpEx. How are you servicing these ground terminals?
We are largely seeing very large scale systems, robotic systems sort of come to life. And this has traditionally been how observatories used to function. Now, optical ground stations are nothing but a modified version of observatories. Observatories were meant to track celestial objects. we are now using them to track satellites and to get data off of them. So given that observatories and the stack was decently automated, we bring a level of synchronization to this automation. So the observatory or the optical ground station is already automated. How do you then create a network layer on top of these ground stations to synchronize downlinks across different sites, to synchronize downlinks between constellations, all of those aspects? So the automation already existed. It's how you put it to play is where we are innovating.
The largest factor that stymies autonomy or edge compute is the latency in data downlinks. So when you're shifting from RF to optical downlinks, what does this measurably change for throughput, for latency, and most critically, your customer's ROI?
So that's exactly where optical connectivity hits, like it's bang to the buck for in all of these factors. Because the swap, which is size, weight, and power in terms of optical terminals, is significantly lower compared to a large RF antenna dish that you would have to rather put on your satellite for a very high throughput. So Ka and Ku band, you would have to put a lot more energy. You would have to put a larger antenna dish. Optical can do that with a 10 centimeter aperture. That's it. The amount of power that's needed is significantly lower. So we know that moving down the line as constellations scale, the only way is this inter-satellite connectivity. And when all of these satellite operators are doing very high throughput between satellites, why should their end mile be just lowest? And that is where this drop in latency that optical ground stations provide is very important to the satellite operator. Because more and more, we are seeing the nature of war. We are seeing the nature of Earth observation change very rapidly in terms of demand. And it's a weird little curve where they pay more for low latency and high throughput than low throughput and high latency. And that's just like common sense. So if I'm able to get data from a satellite in an hour, that's far more valuable to me than getting satellite data in a day. Because when you have to make calls, when you have to make decisions, you want data as is. And that is what optical connectivity sort of offers you. The seamlessness, the real-timeness of a large amount of data from Earth observation satellites, from orbital data centers at your hand in a fraction of a second.
If the switch from RF to FSO or laser-based optical downlinks is the most paramount approach, why isn't the entire ecosystem switching over?
The entire ecosystem is essentially, on one side you have Elon, and then on the other side is everybody trying to catch up.
Right.
And the entirety of Elon is laser connectivity.
Absolutely.
So even today, we see he makes more money through Starlink than he does from the N number of rockets that he's able to produce. So we know that lasers are the new currencies of the space economy. And everybody's trying to just play catch up in being able to do that. And it's not just about, hey, let's put money behind this idea, but you need to have the knowledge of how to operate with this new system, right? Like if I was to give a MacBook to a monkey, he would not know how to work with it, right? So there's a decent amount of education that we have to do with satellite operators, tell them, hey, these are the kinds of specs that would have to change compared to RF. This is the kind of system integration that you would have to put into place into your satellite buses and your constellations. And that is what we do. We help plan customers their constellations, because if I am making the optical terminal that is helping you connect between satellites, you've never done this before. And you need somebody who understands this deeply to be able to help you manage your constellations and these kinds of things.
Why is Qosmic the right person to build this future, or the right entity to build this future?
I will say this, all three co-founders put together, we bring over, I would say 3 decades of building relevant technologies, because I have worked in building superconducting qubits, making satellites that can launch bio payloads into space. So we've dealt with relevant spaces before. My co-founder, Professor Alok Kumar, he has been doing space-based development for almost a decade at this point. He's the creator of Space Bricks. He's the mentor of astronaut Shubhanshu Shukla, who was the second astronaut from India to go to space, the first Indian to be at the ISS. And that is where we got a very core customer validation. You'll be very surprised when he was on the ISS, they were not able to send all of their data down to the ground just because the amount of pictures that they were taking. And to get customer validation from a man in space, there's nothing like this.
Absolutely.
And
from the horse's mouth.
Exactly. And my CTO, Dr. Rohit Ramakrishnan, he has been the co-developer of the world's first quantum satellite. In 2012, even before the Chinese were building a quantum satellite, this man was in the lab making a laser module and these kinds of things go up in space. So dealing with these problems firsthand before almost anybody else in the world has given us a worldview of where this fails, how this fails, and what can we do to fix this and scale this. Because the perspective that I bring to at least this market is that the glory of space has to sort of go away from Congress. Like, sure, but at the end of the day, you're doing a business in this industry and you have to look at it that way. That is why we build unit economics, we build scale from day one into how we build our products, how we think about this technology, how we think about scaling these operations. And that enables us to leverage our position into the market, have the right kinds of technical ethos to be able to challenge the incumbents in this market and build an ecosystem that will just grow with them.
You project a demand of 600,000 satellites, which are currently through the application process, but you're building 50 stations. It sounds to me like the market is still very much underserved. So what is your calculus to actually scale?
So that's where a lot of people get, how do I say this? Not the unit economics, but the dynamics of ground stations a little mixed up. It's not about quantity, it's really about quality. So it's useless for me to put 1,000 ground stations in India, right? Because see, satellites move across the earth very fast. So you need like pan global or global coverage for these ground stations. So even if I have 50, I can service a decent chunk of these 60,000 satellites, 600,000 satellites that are going up in the sky. It's just, you have to be very optimized in terms of operations. And this 50 is for the commercial players, right? On the defense end of things, that is sort of a hidden number because 50 is operations for constellations, commercial players, private players. But when we talk about the defense, that procurement cycle looks entirely different. There, I just have to sell these ground stations as is. This is a network of ground stations that I operate. For the defense, it's unit pieces that I sort of sell. So in total, you sell a lot more ground stations. It's just what they're operating for, what customer base are they targeting, looks a little different. Yeah.
How do you sell optical to a defense customer who's built decades of doctrine around RF?
We don't. So the defense procurement cycles in the country India are very different from the defense procurement cycles in the United States. And the way I see it is you cannot build a business that is solely dependent on defense contracts. Now, that is a case that you can sort of do that in the United States, but that's not a very good business decision to make when you're building a technology like this out of India, because it takes time for people to understand what's going on. It takes time for people to see the results, the success. And what we've seen here is if you're successful, then they'll ask you, hey, you know what, can I get this? Rather than me looking for my success through defense channels. So if I prove commercial success, that's good enough for the defense to know that, hey, you know what, this stack works. And now I can just take and use this for my operations. I think that's a better way to sell to the defense than using their money to build things that might not work and the orders might not come through.
So shifting gears to commercial customers, what are the second order effects for them of using optical terminals?
First order effect, of course, is you are now managing a constellation. You can do more data and like connected data. But the second order effect is, again, more throughput, the ability to being able to downlink significantly faster. But it also allows them to break unit economics on their satellite coverage. if I just have one satellite taking the images and photos of the Earth or whatever it's planning to do, then the revisit time is significantly larger. Now that I have a constellation, then I can service each area significantly faster. And that's just the constellation now. The ability to now have data downlink at that rate enables dissemination of this data and the analytics on this data now significantly faster. So it's like a, how do I say this, trickle down effect, which is throughout the entirety of the space economy. Because if you talk to any satellite operator, they essentially plan their entire mission around their downlink speeds. That hey, you know what? My camera is only going to run so long because this is the amount of data that I'm able to send. So you are spending $2 to $3 million, 3 to 4 years making a mission. And at the end of the day, you're choked by this one ITU filing that, okay, 10 Mbps is my downlink. That's it.
And losing a lot of data in the process.
Losing a lot of data, and you've put such expensive hardware up in the sky and you're not utilizing it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because your operations are curtailed by your downlink parameters. That has to fundamentally change. This will change the way people operate satellites, because your rationale of, hey, this is the only downlink and this is the only throughput that I can get goes away. So now you're able to make more ambitious bets on the data. And that's essentially why half of our customers are not even Earth observation players. They are orbital data centers. Because when you look at orbital data centers, that is where we come back to our last point of throughput, latency, and speed. If you have ground-based data centers and you are launching space-based data centers, how do you connect the two? That is what you need. And optical ground stations is the only way that you're able to do this. And that's exactly why TerraWave now wants to do optical ground stations. Mm-hmm. Elon wants to do optical ground stations, because Starlink is cute for commercial players, but the actual money lies in enterprise. And enterprise needs low latency, enterprise needs more data. And hence the vast amount of need for these optical ground stations.
Earlier, you alluded to aperture. You can beam to a 9.5 meter optical target from LEO consistently.
Yes.
How?
So the 9.5 essentially comes from the beam size that you are throwing from the optical terminal in space. The ground station on Earth is significantly smaller. It's less than a meter.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's, how do I say this? It's twice or thrice this size. And that's it. That is the level of precision optics that you now need. Mm-hmm. And the way we sort of solve this is, you look at that infrastructure stack that came from astronomy and you question it from first principle basis. Because light has fundamentally been looked at as image. Mm-hmm. Now light is being looked at as signal. The way you interact with that is fundamentally different. I can have a fuzzy image, but I can still, fuzzy images are not good for me because I lose what I'm able to see. Fuzzy signals are still good enough. I can extract those signals. I can create higher SNRs through redundant systems, building more redundancies into systems, building more redundancies into apertures, and how the stack gets built. And that enables us to look at this entire optical ground station stack from a new eyes. So seeing light as signal, now how do you solve this entire technology, which is the mount that is able to track satellites, the telescope that is able to catch the signals of film, the corrective measures, because people say this, and this is very true, atmosphere is a killer for optical ground stations, and that is the major roadblock. But when you have the right kind of site, when you have the right location, why are you then not being able to do this at the right location? That is where you need to kill costs, because there are good enough sites. I already told you, I just need 50 locations across the world to be able to service this, right? There are good enough 50 locations across the world I can put a ground station on. It's the cost of putting that ground station there that drives my unit economics, that trickle downs into this entire stack. So we make mounts that are now able to track satellites at that speed at a fraction of the Western cost. We are now able to make fast steering mirrors, which is the heart of the system for any optical system indigenously. And that is how we take this approach from baseline fundamental, technology pieces that are relevant to this area, and how do you break cost on them, and how do you build scale to them.
You are partnering up with another group to build your optical terminals. Can you talk to me about how and why ecosystem partnerships can help you scale?
So, ecosystem partnerships are essentially very important because they help you understand your customer needs better. At the end of the day, when we look at space industries, there are a lot of closed mouths.
Okay.
Not a lot of people talk, and that's just the nature of the industry, right?
Sure.
You're dealing with a lot of sensitive information, sensitive kinds of builds and core technologies, fundamental technologies. And when people don't open mouths, then you do not get customer feedback.
Yeah.
And getting that customer feedback is very essential for iteration. When you do partnerships like these, you get not just instant customer feedback, but you're building with the customer. They need this. I have the ability to build this. If we build this together, it's a win-win for both. And I get work done faster. If I was to just sit in my silo and build this, I will always aim for perfection. But here, when the customer is building this with me, then we know it hits the customer specs. Now this works. Working technology is better than perfect technology. Yeah.
How do you see your addressable market expanding from 2026 to 2030?
So our addressable market, I think optical ground stations increase the addressable market for optical terminals by a large quantity. Because if you fundamentally look at this space, you see that optical terminals were always thought of, at least initially, for inter-satellite links. So I always had to launch a constellation for me to put an optical terminal on my satellite, because now I'm connecting n number of satellites together. Optical ground stations tell you that's not a need. You can just put an optical terminal and use this as a downlink connection. So you don't need to be a very rich guy to launch n number of satellites and have them interconnected. You can just be a satellite operator who just wants decent enough downlink. And now, because optical ground stations exist for you as a service, you're able to put an optical terminal. It increases the addressable market for optical terminals by many folds, because now you don't need constellations. Single operators, small operators, universities, groups, students can just put them on their satellites because it's low power, because it's low cost, and just work with it.
In what application do you see the biggest disruption?
Orbital data centers.
Okay.
That's where you see the most amount of latency use. That's where you see the most amount of enterprise use for optical connectivity and the need for optical ground stations. Besides that, it's also Earth observation players, because again, they are taking vast amounts of data and need to be able to send this down. But how those constellations get planned and how that market takes up this optical connectivity is on the market, and which is where our hand-holding with the customer sort of comes into play, helping them plan constellations on their end, what this might look like. That helps them take this call on this technology. Because Elon took a very early call, and that created him in leaps and bounds, right? Like today, he's being able to make this IPO because of Starlink, not because of Starship. So that essentially also creates a very strong case study for anybody who's wanting to have n number of satellites in the sky, that, hey, you know what? Laser is the way for me to go. And we can help them do that.
And years later, you're hopefully capturing more than 25% of the market. What supply chain bottlenecks today stymie that?
A very big problem for us is India does not have core optics manufacturing, and we are an optical communication company.
Sounds critical.
Yeah. So we've had to rely on European partners or Southeast Asian partners for things like this. And that is where our competitors have an advantage over us. Because for the Europeans, they get your optics at cost. We get optics at price. So if I am getting optics at price, I now have to look at other ways, which is the optomechanics, mounts, FSM, that other end of the stack to kill my price. So how do I then play with a cheap optics and an indigenized optical optomechanical stack to be able to put this together and bring that price point for the customer?
Are you using AI in your solution?
In our solution, as in optical connectivity, maybe down the line, but we are at our core as a company very, very AI native because it's a very essential tool and it makes you a 10x engineer almost immediately. Before this, 10x engineers were sort of born and brought up and bred that, hey, you know what, I'm a 10x engineer, but now anybody can be a 10x engineer if they're good enough with their AI skills. You're able, like, ideas have become very cheap. So the ability to run through ideas and validate them becomes significantly faster. I can tell you this today, I would not have been here today if it wasn't for Claude. That's how indispensable some of these tools become.
Right.
And if they are indispensable and if you have them company-wide, then you can build very intelligent systems that create easy workflow for everybody. That creates very strong internal tools that you could not build before for everybody. And that compounds over time and how fast you're able to move in terms of your build.
You, again, earlier alluded to working in quantum. And before this podcast, we talked about quantum being the future, quantum communications being the future. So what calculus needs to shift for QKD or for quantum communications? Would you bet on it in the future?
The reason why we make this stack is because it's our long-standing goal and not just Rohit has been doing this for decades. I, at 13, was like, I just need to make quantum computers. Yeah. So we have lived this reality for over a decade. And we realized that for that technology to be adopted, a baseline infrastructure is needed. So the way we see this is, if today I build optical infrastructure, it not only provides and solves a pertinent need for space communication industry right now, but it also builds a stack that is enabling quantum communication at large in the future. Because we have built quantum technologies, we know that they are very cute and very good in the tiny little rooms that they are. But at the end of the day, there has to be a network that talks to each other. A computer in its own room is as good as that device when it talks to nothing else. So when you have to create a network, you have to create a baseline infrastructure that is capable of doing that. And that is what optical connectivity, optical ground stations do. We know that for QKD to scale, you cannot do it through fiber network. You have to do it through free space optics. And if you have to do it through free space optics, you have to build this optical infrastructure today. That's how we sort of landed at optical ground station, because we realized that the scaler for this quantum communication was free space optics. And you can only do this from space-based comms. And that led us to this area. So we know that the TAM for optical infrastructure is so massive that I can't even calculate it in terms of quantum connectivity, if and when that happens. But my hope for that area is that there are a lot of ancillary technologies that are now needed for quantum to becoming real. Those ancillary technologies have to be built, and fundamental, science is still yet to be solved in terms of scaling quantum computers or quantum communication. So that is still in that research phase, and I cannot wait for that research phase to finish. So I have to build my stack for now so that when that happens, I'm compatible with it.
We're going to do a quick rapid fire. You're going to rank these risks from 1 to 4, 4 being the biggest risk for your operational success. Sure. Okay. Atmospheric turbulence.
2.
Okay. Weather interference.
3.
Precision pointing.
3.
Optomechanical assemblies.
2.
Ground terminal hacking or external threats.
3.
3. Is there anything that's a 4 that I'm missing?
A 4 on that list is market adoption.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So if the industry is just like, hey, you know what, we have good enough Ka and Ku bands, there's enough antennas in the market that I don't need to solve for optical and do all of this, that kills my business.
Right.
But we know that that's not going to be the case just based on pure physics and how some of these things operate. And that's our bet into this market. Right. The other thing is, a network is very important here. Like me making one ground station, not enough. I need 10 across the world for me to be able to service people correctly. And that distribution has to, I have to get there faster. That's my goal.
Faster than your competitors.
Yeah, faster than anybody in the world. That includes Elon.
Fair enough. That's a tall order.
I don't think so.
No?
No.
Okay. Oh, why not?
Because we know that they're also on the hunt for optical ground station.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't like to say that, like, IP is never a flag that you can hold that, hey, now I've won.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the end of the day, if you have good enough money, then you can just power through some of these things. And that's why I say distribution for me is very key. I have to get to 10, 20, or whatever that ground station, that critical mass is faster than anybody else in the world.
Switching from engineering to entrepreneurship is a journey in itself. So what's a belief about yourself you had to unlearn to be here today?
See, I'll preface this by saying, since I was a little kid, I've always wanted to make a tech company.
Okay.
So my
You've been
entire
training
life,
for this.
I've been training for this.
Okay.
My entire life, I've been just training to be able and capable of doing this. But I'll tell you, that entire capability and that learning is only till you are a founder, not when you become a CEO.
Okay.
So a founder's job is to get the company going.
Right.
But a CEO's job is to run the show and run the company, run the execution and everything. And that has been the greatest unlearning experience in terms of not just tech to entrepreneurship, but just within entrepreneurship, how do you function? So I can prepare all my life to have the founder mindset, but when I have a team and when I have to manage dynamics, that is when it's a day to day. Like, how do I solve this day to day? And nobody can prepare you for that.
Right.
Ever. Because all these dynamics are new. They are personal to yourself, personal to the build that you're doing, to the people that you've hired. So all of that learning of hiring the right people, setting the right culture, equipping them with the right enough resources that they're able to do their job well and being able to push the boundaries. That is the greatest amount of learning that I have to go from being a founder to a CEO.
As optical handshake protocols mature, how is Qosmic positioned?
Yeah, so we do have a pipeline for some of our, how do I say this, future engineers and people who are joining us who have been parts of forming these standards. So we are actively shaping them. But the way I see it is interoperability of optical terminals, optical communication stack, networking is a very core feature. And that is where, when we look at the United States, so United States through the SDA program and the PWSA program, they have been getting to that point of interoperability, because it was a problem in tranche 0 and tranche 1, but tranche 2 onwards, they're like, hey, you know what, we have to focus on interoperability of optical terminals and the ground station stack. Now, if the United States from a defense angle is closed off in terms of testing for interoperability of terminals and the stack from the rest of the world, then the rest of the world has to band together to build towards this interoperability. And that is my goal, that if I am building this and somebody else is building this in Singapore, somebody's building this in Australia or South Africa or any part of this world, even China for that matter, let's all talk together. Let's see how we can establish this, because at the end of the day, when you have to drive market adoption, when you have to drive ground stations adoption, everything, it is about a network. You cannot solely build this entire stack unless you have Elon-like money, and which nobody else has. So might as well work together and build this together so that whoever wins, right? That can happen then. But at least let's just start working and let this get going.
Yeah. Standardization is the key unlock for Space 3.0. What should we look forward to from Qosmic over the next 3 months?
Over the next 3 months, we want to establish and break our own record. So currently we hold the record for a 10-kilometer optical link. We have now reworked our entire stack for this to be, robust to all these optical standards that we are talking about, right? And we want to have the ability to show this at 20 kilometers and far more. So we are currently building our first satellite, and then this receiver, which is the ground station end of things, to be able to showcase this technology. Yeah.
Let's talk about your next fundraise. What kind of investors are you seeking?
So currently, I'm very happy that we are backed by South Park Commons, because South Park Commons took a very, very early bet on what we are building, and they gave a very material, how do I say this, difference to us as founders, and especially to my co-founder Rohit. Because what happens in a lot of our area is we are technical co-founders. You don't really know the entrepreneurship world, you don't know the VC world, you don't know the startup world, right? And you're just sort of thrown into this. SPC helped us see this world and helped us see how far our ambition can grow. So in Bangalore, and the way, and this is, I wouldn't call it a problem for Indians, but we are always very cash conservative. That cash conservative helps us in certain areas. But when you have to dream wild and big, you have to remove that cash conservatism. You have to dream as big and then use that cash conservatism to make this into a business.
Right.
That dreaming big part does not really happen when you have cash conservatism built into your mind.
Right.
My co-founders saw that in SF, and that opened their eyes on how big we can dream. So that is the kind of investors, right? That's the same with Axel and Prosus, who are now backing our seed round, where Axel point blank asked me, and nobody had asked me this, how do you become $1 billion revenue company? Now that is a question I'd never answered for myself, but the ability to show that, hey, you know what, there is a world that exists out there and you can get there. And because your thought process changes, how you see this world, how do you approach your stack, how you build towards it. So that is the kind of VCs that we are currently partnering with. But as we walk down this path of commercialization and building this technology with the right kinds of commercial partners and government partners, we know that we want more international participation and the right kind of international participation for some of our technology stack here. So maybe people like who have built networks, fiber optic networks, or large networks in like maybe Nokia, right? Or
AWS. Houses like these who have built this network where it helps them to have this optical connectivity in their stack as well. And it increases the scope of their market and our market altogether. That is the kind of strategic investment that we are looking for moving down the line.
How can Orbital data centers, Nokia, Siemens, defense partners, VCs contact you or Qosmic?
We have a book a ground station live on our website. So you guys can book one ground station like right away. And if you want to talk to me, I don't know how to plug my information, but I'm always on Twitter. I'm always available on like email.
This has been Space Terminal. I'm Zuni from Imagining Forward. New episodes are out every week. You can find Shreyaans Jain and Qosmic in the show notes. You can also look up Qosmic on our intelligence tool at imaginingforward.space. Thank you for joining us, Shreyaans. Appreciate your candid mails.